That's the prosecution delivering the closing arguments in the George Burch case. One of the great things about this case is no matter who you ask, they're split. People are split about whether or not George Burch actually did this and whether or not Douglas Dietrich, Nicole's boyfriend, is the one who actually was the killer here. So there's a lot of arguments back and forth, and we figured it would be good to have a debate about this morning as we go into the closing arguments. So joining me right now on set is attorney Jonna Spilbor, who will be taking up the argument for the defense. I also have with us law and crime trial analyst Julie Rendelman, who will be taking up the point of the prosecution. Ladies, it's great to see both of you.
Good to see you.
I got the short straw.
I think she did get this short straw.
Well, remember, we don't know what the verdict is. I just want you to argue your best cases.
I still think she got the short straw.
Well, let's talk about it. Julie, we're watching the prosecution delivering the closing arguments. Right. Here's the problem for them, the motive here. The motive seems, why would you have a complete stranger, okay, who had no relation to Nicole Vanderheide and be the killer, as opposed to Douglas Dietrich, who had the access, he had the relationship, he had the problems. How did the prosecution get past that?
Well, first of all, remember, motive is not needed in order to prove Burch's guilt beyond reasonable doubt. In fact, the jury's told that they don't need motive. And quite frankly, all the things you said in terms of Dietrich's motive don't really exist. When you talk about the fact that there was like problems in the relationship, if you look at the text, it seemed more that she had problems with him in terms of jealousy and things like that than he did with her. And in terms of access, if we talk about the evidence that's in this case, he didn't have access. His Fitbit indicates he didn't have the access to kill her. All the evidence points to Burch as being the individual. So I don't really see motive as being kind of something that stands in the way. Also, the way this individual, Nicole, was murdered is such that it doesn't seem to be a crime of passion and more of some type of fight over what I think was clearly a rape.
Okay, but if we stick on motive here, Julie makes a good point, Jonna, the fact that why couldn't this just be a random act of violence? I mean, the prosecution in their opening argument said this community, when you see this kind of thing, it scares everybody. You want to blame the boyfriend, but it's not always him.
Well, as Julie correctly pointed out, motive is never, it's an issue, but it's not something that a case is ever, that can ever be decided upon. But what we have here, when you only have motive on one side in an effort to use that to prove or disprove your case, it pales in comparison to what the prosecution seems to be presenting here, which is a ton of evidence, forensic, most of it, evidence, putting the defendant in the place where the murder could have been committed.
Right. All right. I like the opening arguments from both of you guys. Again, we're playing for you the prosecution's opening arguments. I say opening arguments. My fault, everybody. Closing arguments. Again, the case did conclude yesterday. Here is a continuation of the state's closing arguments. Take a look.
Checking routinely, regularly, and not looking for anything else. How many accounts did you hear of on that forensic search of his phone? He's worried about being discovered. You learned about that, and that's further proof of his involvement in committing this crime. And all this evidence is undisputed. In the opening, the defense told you it was his phone. He was at those locations. It is his DNA. This isn't even something we need to argue about because it's uncontradicted. The defense told you. They agreed with the state's evidence, most of the state's evidence. They told you it would come down to argument. Well, we say it comes down to logic and common sense, not argument. They cannot erase our evidence. Now the defendant has to try to come up with an explanation for all this evidence. Find a way to explain it to you. He needs an explanation for all the physical and scientific evidence that shows that he's a killer. Their explanation is ridiculous and it's insulting to your intelligence. They offer distractions, but worse, they offer testimony of the defendant. Such arrogance. He meets Nikki at Richard Cranium's. He's a stranger. He doesn't know her. What's he tell you? She's flirting with him. What's he say? You can tell when someone's into you. Clearly, this 6'7" hunk of man.
Again, you got to love this. If you heard what the prosecutor just said, the forensic evidence shows that George Burch was looking obsessively about this case moments after Nicole's death, but that could go both ways, whether he was the killer or somebody who helped dispose of the body. and it's really up to the jury to make a determination. We're going to go to a quick break, and when we come back, we have much more to analyze in this case out of Wisconsin. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Law and Crime Live, everybody. We're covering the George Burch case out of Wisconsin, a man charged with first-degree intentional homicide in connection with a young mother, and his defense team is pointing the finger at her boyfriend. So yesterday we were not able to show you, our broadcast ended before we were able to show you the closing arguments of both by the state and the defense. That's what we're replaying for you right now, and then we will reveal the final verdict in this case that was delivered yesterday. But before we do, we have so much to analyze in this case, and the great thing about this case is you can look at one piece of evidence and it can be argued two different ways. As you heard before the break, the prosecutor talked about the fact that if you looked on George Burch's cell phone or forensic data, he was constantly searching about Nicole's murder. Now, that could look strange, or that could look okay depending upon which way you argue for it. So let's talk about it. Again, I'm here with attorney Jonna Spilbor arguing for the defense. I'm here with law and crime trial analyst Julie Rendelman arguing for the state. Jonna, searching for everything that happened to Nicole on his phone. What do you make of it?
Well, you could look at it from the defense side as if someone's about to accuse you of committing a crime, you're going to want to Google the heck out of that to find out what they know. If they're going to actually accuse you, did somebody else do it? You could just have this insane curiosity about what happened, and that's why you're looking everything up on the internet.
Julie, you buy that?
Well, that actually sounds like more of a prosecution argument. And remember, when we're talking about him looking up what's on the internet, you can't look at it in a vacuum. You have to look at it based on what we know, which is the DNA and the GPS and all the other evidence that supports that he's involved. And the thing that you have to question is, if he's looking, he knows at some point that Dietrich is being let go. And so if you buy the nonsense that Dietrich's the real killer, then at that point when he realizes he's let go after Googling it, why isn't he making a call to the police then? Why isn't he making an anonymous tip then? He's not, because he's looking it up to see if they're coming closer to the real killer, which is him.
But Julie, here's the flip side of it. The reason he didn't report to the police and the reason he was searching so much is he said, I thought that they were going to arrest Dietrich. I didn't want to be involved anymore. Couldn't he just, this is just an innocent looking at it and seeing what's happening?
By the way, Jesse, and I don't want to argue with you, but when you say an innocent looking at it, there is nothing about this case that indicates anything that Burch did was innocent. And again, if he was following the internet, he knew that at some point Dietrich was let go. I believe he was let go 17 to 18 days after the murder. Well, and you know what he does? He gets rid of his truck and burns his truck. And I know we're all saying that there's no clear evidence, but all the DNA that would have established Dietrich being in his vehicle was destroyed. And I can't believe I'm talking like I'm in court, but it was destroyed by him. I forgot where it was.
But wait a minute. Since George Burch, his theory of the case is the boyfriend did do it, right? Mr. Dietrich did do it. So why wouldn't you want to go online and find out how close they're coming to the actual killer? I think it makes perfect sense.
And if he was the one who disposed of the body and now it's all in the news, right? Maybe he's curious about what happened.
And Burch is a victim himself of Mr. Dietrich, if you think about it.
But Dietrich eventually is let go, and he's let go within 17 to 18 days. And so if you're the person who's concerned that the killer is being let go, then why on earth isn't he making an anonymous tip at that point to lead them back to Dietrich, not to lead them to him?
Before we keep going into the state's argument, you make a good point. So what about the argument that he didn't want to report it because he was on probation, all right? He was afraid. He said, I'm afraid I was going to go to jail. When he testified, I would get 5 years if I reported this. I'm involved in some girl's murder and covering up the body at my gunpoint. They won't believe me. What do you say to that, Julie?
Again, we go back to what we talked about before, which is nothing you look at in this case can be looked at in a vacuum. So yes, if we're just looking at someone looking up the internet, myself could be looking at it, you could be looking at it, it wouldn't really make a difference. But it's Burch looking at it. And the evidence about Burch being the killer is overwhelming. With the GPS, with the DNA, with the fact that all the story he gave in regards to Dietrich's acts in this case make absolutely no sense, and the evidence isn't supported by it. So when you couple that with his internet searches, it just establishes even more that he's the person that's responsible.
But he's not a sophisticated guy, Jonna. Maybe he thought he doesn't know the criminal justice system like everybody here,
Well,
and maybe
hang
he
on.
does.
He did have a few. He did have a few priors.
Yes,
under his
but
belt.
didn't he have a reasonable fear of 5 years in prison for probation?
Yeah, he had a reasonable fear. Nobody wants to get involved when there's a serious. This was a murder, right? You don't want to put yourself at the scene. You don't want to do that. You want to do your behind-the-scenes investigation. I think the fact that he was online searching, which is something we all do every day about a million different things, I think that's really de minimis when it comes to a factor in this case.
All right, well, there's a lot to analyze, and we keep analyzing the state's closing arguments. Let's continue and hear what they had to say.
You saw his picture. What was a girl to do? What were Nikki's choices? He told you she didn't seem to be with anyone. She was by herself. He saw her as prey, somebody to move in on. He had one thing in mind, and it was not giving her a ride home. Think about it. They both wanted consensual sex. They would have gone to his house, to his home, where he had a room, 2.5 blocks, he says, from Richard Cranium's, where he had privacy, where he was allowed to bring home women and did it on other occasions. Oh, but no, there was an elderly gentleman in the house at the time in the living room. That makes no sense. But no, they don't have sex there. They don't go to a hotel. No, it's on to Berkeley. And she obviously had to tell him how to get there. He didn't know where it was. She obviously gave him directions because she thought he was taking her home. To her child. To the father of her child. To her home. And that's also, when you get to Berkeley, how we know the defendant's lying when he testified. Because what did he tell you that Nikki said? He claimed Nicole told him there was a light on and the babysitter was there. Nicole would never have made that statement. There was no car in the driveway or in the street. Dallas's vehicle was not there. Nikki would have not said, oh, the babysitter's still there. Dallas testified she'd gone already. She left around 3 a.m., right before they got there. There was no vehicle to be seen. She's friends with Dallas. She knew her car. She would never have said, oh, the babysitter's here. There's a light on. She would have seen the car was gone, and she would probably assumed that Doug was home. He makes this statement up. He makes up this account. This whole thing is made up. And that statement there points out that Nikki didn't say that because none of this happened.
Okay, so now the state's getting into the fact that they had this sexual encounter, George Burch and Nicole Vanderheiden, outside of her house, and it becomes a question, why were they outside of the house? It becomes very curious. Jonna, what do you make of it?
Well, I thought they were outside the house because the house was occupied to be having sex outside the vehicle.
That's a good point, Julie, but couldn't you also say that, okay, they didn't want anybody to know. She didn't want Douglas Dietrich to know about this. She didn't want the babysitter, so what's the harm in having it outside?
Well, first of all, let's be clear that the autopsy results reveal that injuries to the vagina and the cervix area that are not normal injuries that even you would expect for rough sex. So when we start to think about that, we start to realize that maybe it's not quite the way he described it. Secondly, there would be no reason in the world for her to kind of be in a position where she's outside of her home with the potential that neighbors would see her, that individuals that are inside of the house, her boyfriend would see her. It makes absolutely no sense that, as they said, his tuchus would be hanging out of the window for all to see her engaging in this inappropriate behavior.
Well, then again, wasn't she drinking a little bit that night? So maybe her
inhibitions
were
By
a
the
little
way, there's inhibitions and there's inhibitions. I think there's no basis to believe that she wasn't cognizant of her surroundings, especially because we know that she found a way to get herself home. So if she was able to articulate to him how to get her to drive her the right way, then there's no reason to think that she didn't understand what would be going on outside of her home.
Okay, this argument between forcible sex and rough sex was really articulated well by the state in their closing argument. Let's listen in where they talk about it.
He tries to make you believe this encounter was consensual as far as sexual activity. Killing her is not enough. He seeks to defame her. Her life's gone, so let's go after her reputation. She's not here to counter these outrageous claims. That's very convenient for him. Infidelity. What, revenge sex? He calls it wasn't gentle intercourse. So now we're supposed to believe this stay-home mom, this part-time substitute teacher, is into rough sex with a stranger. He has no shame. What really happened? Evaluate the proof. What happened, do we know, to this poor woman's person and her private areas? Contusions, abrasions, vaginal vault blood presence. And think about this. The doctor told you this wasn't just from stomping, this was internal injuries as well. Penetration took place. Consider the vaginal area. This woman was in a relationship with a man. She'd borne 3 children. The vaginal area is an area designed for penetration. People around the world have sexual intercourse, and we don't have abrasions and contusions and bleeding. This was forcible. This was painful. The doctor told you that. But the defendant can't admit that because it's his motive for the murder. You don't need a medical degree to draw the same conclusion Dr. Ogalska did, that this was suggestive of a sexual assault. The evidence and the injuries suggestive of a sexual assault. This was a forcible penetration. It would have been a painful penetration. It was a rape. But aside from all these horrible injuries, which are horrible, with respect to just that area of her person, practically speaking, ladies and gentlemen, I know you use your common sense. Why do we know that she did not choose to have sex with this defendant? It's because of the location. It's like real estate. It's all about the location. You're not going to have sex in front of your neighbor's house and near your own home, where your father of your child may be right around the corner. Great place for romantic trips. The back of the Blazer, where he says he barely fits. Well, wait, let's make it even better. Let's open the doors so the show gets even better for the neighborhood. It's an absurd account for something that's supposed to have been consensual, because it wasn't. The outlandish account continues when he talks.
You're watching this clip from yesterday where the prosecutor is really hammering down the point that this was not consensual sex between 2 lovers, 2 people that wanted to have sex. This was rape. This was a sexual assault, and this was murder. This was really the point that the prosecution wanted to hammer down in their closing arguments. That's what we're replaying for you here today. We're replaying for you the closing arguments by both sides because a verdict was handed down yesterday, and we are analyzing every aspect of this case. We are going to take a quick break. We'll be back in a minute. Welcome back to Law and Crime, everybody. We are covering the murder case of Nicole Vanderheiden, a 31-year-old mother, a really beautiful young mother out of Wisconsin that was taken in the prime of her life. Her life was taken, and we're trying to decide who did this. George Burch is on trial for her murder, but his defense team is saying it was Douglas Dietrich, her boyfriend. What we're doing right now is recapping a lot of this case. A verdict was handed down last night, but we're not revealing it to you just yet. What we are doing is replaying the prosecution and defense's closing arguments because we did not have an opportunity to show them to you yesterday here on Crime and Investigation. So let's analyze a little bit more about this. Again, I'm here with Jonna Spilbor and Julie Rendelman. Jonna.
Yes.
Before we went to break, the prosecutor was saying that these injuries, that Nicole's injuries, are highly consistent with a rape.
Right.
How do you argue against that?
All right, so here's where I think the prosecution made a little bit of a mistake. This particular prosecutor seems to be making judgments perhaps from her own personal interest that, a teacher wouldn't want to have consensual sex in a car outside of her house, in front of her neighbors, where the man that she's engaging in sex with is showing his rear end to the whole neighborhood. She's claiming because no, I guess, normal person would voluntarily do that, therefore this needed to be rape. But then that begs the question, well, then why would somebody publicly rape another person? So it's quite possible that two people engaged in consensual sex in a vehicle, and yes, it could be rough. It doesn't automatically mean that it was rape.
But I'll go to you, Julie, in a second. But isn't the answer could be, if this guy's a maniac, he's a maniac. He doesn't follow the normal standards as everybody else. If he really did kill her, who cares if he's raping her in public?
Well, no, but you know what? Here's what I think one of the points that bothered me is she said, what substitute teacher would ever want to have sex in a car in front of her neighbors? Well, you can't. That doesn't prove anything.
Julie, that's a good point. Isn't that making an assumption? She's a substitute teacher. She can't cheat on her boyfriend. She can't have sexual relations with a stranger?
I don't think the argument was that she's a substitute teacher and therefore she can't cheat. I think what she was saying is this is a woman that just had a baby less than 6 months ago. She was still breastfeeding, you know. So, and by the way, this was like 7 hours.
Have to do with the price of tea?
Well, actually it does, because anyone who's had kids knows that at 7 hours when you're still breastfeeding, you're in excruciating pain usually at that point because you're engorged, which was one of the questions they asked the defendant in regards to that. Two, the issue wasn't whether she, I understand the argument that simply because she's a substitute teacher doesn't mean she's not going to cheat. But the problem with the scenario is, why would she cheat there? Why wouldn't she just go back and agree to go back to his apartment? We knew from the testimony that he was allowed to have people come back to the apartment, including women.
But Ed Jackson's father was there in a robe, and you can imagine, isn't a fair argument, this guy's father's there. I don't want to bring a girl back in that way.
Based on whose testimony?
Well, where is the perfect place to cheat? Is there a perfect place to cheat? I don't think so.
Remember, again, because we keep talking about this one moment in time, and we have to remember that this case isn't about whether or not his cheeks were hanging out of the car. The question is kind of surrounding it, what happened to lead up to it? And there's absolutely nothing that indicates this was anything but a sexual assault. Remember, he says that her clothes were off. Well, if her clothes were off, then why are her clothes bloody and dirty when they're recovered? Because they're still on her when the death happens. And so you can't look at anything in a vacuum. And when you look at it that way, you know that there's nothing he's saying that's accurate.
Jonna, real quick, that's a good point, that we saw the clothes yesterday in court. They were shown, and the underwear was drenched in blood. The pants were inside out. There was blood stains. This doesn't appear to be something that is other than rape.
There are rough sex can cause bleeding, which was one of the defense's points. And I don't know, did the defense bring up whether or not she was? It was that time of the month.
I don't think they brought that up, but we'll have to see. We'll have to see. Again, we are covering this. Ladies, stand by, because there's a lot more to discuss in this case. What I want to play for you again right now, we're continuing the prosecution's closing arguments. Let's hear where they went next.
Escape from Hoffman. When the man has him at gunpoint, some 5 feet away, but he's able to lunge. Push as hard as I could, and haul ass, as he says it, to his truck, which was 10 to 15 feet away. Bullets don't fly. They can't cross the distance faster than him running. Gets in there, no shots fired at the car, and he puts it in low gear, and still, Doug Dietrich lets him go, the witness to the murder. It's ridiculous. The defendant then chooses to dispose of all the evidence on 172 that can actually tell us what happened, that can give us clues, that needs to be in the hands of authorities. And then after this frightening near-death experience, drives home, goes to bed, doesn't call anyone, sends no aid to Nikki, who he doesn't even know is dead and is laying in a field. Doesn't call 911, goes to sleep, sleeps in, he's awakened by Ed the next day, goes fishing. Because, well, after all, it was a pre-planned event. He doesn't tell Ed in the morning, on the trip down. Maybe on the boat there were other people around. They're spending the time together in the evening. He's driving back with him, and he doesn't tell Ed Jackson squat. The man who reminded him of his dad, who was his best friend. The father figure, Ed Jackson. The one person I could talk to, he says on direct. Isn't that ironic? Well, apparently he wasn't. And all the while, he's checking on the news stories, even before there's an arrest of Doug Dietrich. Checking out, wow, Do they know yet? Am I going to get away with this? Even later on his phone, even when the police are begging someone to come forward, if you know anything about these circumstances, asking for help from our community, he says nothing. But he's got an explanation for that, ladies and gentlemen, because from where he comes from, you don't talk. You don't tell on people. I feared for my own safety I could end up dead. Well, let's think about that. You're the only one who knows who the true killer is. You could identify that true killer and take him off the streets. But no, you run the risk you'll just bump into him again in Green Bay, where you continue to visit for months and you don't reveal what you know. You could make yourself safe by making sure the police have the right man and you give them the evidence they need.
That's the prosecution hammering away against the defendant's theory about what happened that night, that he's not the killer, but that it was Douglas Dietrich. So one of the interesting parts about this case is this injuries that, or I'm going to use quotation mark, injuries that George Burch sustained at the hands of Douglas Dietrich, because according to George Burch, he was knocked in the head by Douglas Dietrich. Unclear if he was knocked unconscious or not, but during that period of time is when Douglas murdered Nicole. And when George came to, there was a gun being pointed at his face by Douglas, and he forced him to remove the body. Now, Julie, big guy, maybe he didn't have a welt on his head, but he was still knocked unconscious. What do you make of it?
I don't know how many times you saw my eyes roll when you were telling the story. So we know, first of all, that he was, as far as he's concerned, he was knocked so hard that he was knocked unconscious. So we would expect to see some type of bruise in some way. Even, by the way, from him falling to the ground, you would expect some bruises on his face, on his back. And we know from the next day that he's on a lovely fishing expedition where his hair is very short and no one sees anything. And so I find that completely incredible. One other thing before I know you are going to come on in is that if he's out cold, why on earth won't Dietrich at that point just kill him? Why would he risk the possibility that this 6'4" guy is going to get up and fight for his life and the life of Nicole?
Jonna, that's a good point. He recruited this stranger as his accomplice and knocked him out, and in that period of time, he murders someone?
That is such a good point. Then when I was trying to formulate my argument in defense of it, I got nothing. So that is a really good
Come on,
point.
Jonna, we need something for the viewers.
You would think that if somebody is going to kill someone who's having sex with his girlfriend in a jealous rage, you kill the guy, right? You let the girl live.
Well, couldn't it be, though, that he didn't want to be accused, Douglas Dietrich, and he's like, hey, I got this guy, I got this patsy, I'll blame him for the crime?
Now, I think, maybe the defendant should have fashioned it as, of course, this guy, Dietrich, wanted to kill me, and, so he hit me hard. It doesn't matter whether I have a welt or not. I passed out. I don't remember what happened. And then look, maybe Dietrich had a conscience, and instead of killing 2 people, he only wanted to kill 1. That's why he recruited the defendant to help him.
I'm not sure that conscience comes into this with regards to anyone, but the story, again, makes absolutely no sense. And so, A, I don't buy that he was passed out, and B, I don't buy he was hit. There's no evidence that supports any of that, and quite frankly, every bit of evidence supports that it just didn't happen.
Well, Julie, we know which way you would vote if you were on that jury, but it's not up to you guys, it's not up to me, it's not even up to the viewers, it is up to all of the jurors to decide whether or not there was enough reasonable doubt to not convict George Burch of first-degree intentional homicide in connection with the death of Nicole Vanderheiden. We are playing for you right now all of the closing arguments by both the state and the defense, and there was a rebuttal by the state as well. We're going to replay that for you, and a little bit later today in the program, I am going to reveal to you the final verdict in this case. It was decided last night. Do not look it up, ladies and gentlemen. We have so much to analyze before we actually deliver the verdict to you. So we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we are going to go right back into the courtroom. Much more to discuss. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Law and Crime Live, everybody. We're covering the George Burch case out of Wisconsin, and yesterday were the closing arguments by both the state and the defense. The state saying George Burch is the one that killed Nicole Vanderheiden, a 31-year-old mother from Wisconsin, and the defense is saying they got it wrong. It was Douglas Dietrich, Nicole's boyfriend. So this back and forth you are about to see is what we're playing for you. Now, I should let our viewers know, we keep repeating this, We do have a verdict in this case, but we are not revealing it yet. We want to fully analyze this case in depth before we hear the final conclusion. Here is the end, I should say the closing part of the prosecution's closing arguments. Take a look.
Today, you saw her filthy pants. You saw her bloody underwear, blood on both objects, and you heard about the bloody top, the tank, and the bloody overshirt. Nikki's clothes prove beyond all doubt that the defendant's account is total fiction, because they show you her clothes were on her when she was killed. All of that blood was from the stomping and the injuries that were on her when she was killed. They're not off, as the defendant would have you believe, because they're having sex in the car, and then she's killed. The clothing tells a different story. The blood stains destroy the defendant's story. She wasn't killed after having sex and after her clothes were already off. And again, the DNA of the defendant in so many locations. From the vaginal swabs, the cervical swabs, the left forearm, the right forearm, the left wrist, the right wrist, the left ankle, the right ankle, the left neck, left posterior neck, the right arm, the left arm, mons pubis, left palm, chest, right hand fingernail clippings, and again the cord, her right foot sock, her left foot sock, and the area of her shirt. He manhandled her and he left his mark. And she gives you that through her voice, through her person, through her clothing. Nikki was viciously and brutally murdered. No one's going to dispute that. 241 injuries, significant facial injuries, a fractured jaw, and the injuries of the genitalia, what we referred to. And again, strangled and blunt force trauma to the head. It was such a horrific death, it's hard to fit all the injuries on the diagram.
That's the prosecution delivering the closing arguments from yesterday in the George Burch case. Let's break it down right now about Douglas Dietrich, this alternative suspect put forward by the defense. Jonna, okay. You tell me, what is there of anything to corroborate the story put forward by George Burch that Douglas Dietrich killed Nicole, accompanied him in the car to where the field was where they dropped Nicole's body off, and then he made his way back to the house? You tell me what evidence we have that corroborates that.
Well, the key piece of evidence, although I have to use the word evidence loosely, that the defense put forth was Dietrich had the motive here. Dietrich caught
evidence, John.
Caught his woman in the act with another guy.
Physical evidence. What is there?
Trouble with that little part called physical evidence.
Now, if there's not, then but here's the thing. You tell me, because here's the flip side of it, okay? And Julie, you can answer this as well. We want to say that we can track him by his Fitbit, but is it not possible, as we heard in the testimony, that he could have taken his Fitbit off?
Of course it's possible.
That way we wouldn't have been able to track his movements. We also know, isn't it possible, that he could have walked back and forth from the where her field was found? I believe it took 58 minutes when the investigator took the stand yesterday and she tested out. 58-minute walk from where the field was back to the home. Isn't it possible that he could have done this and not left a trail?
Is it well, anything's possible. I mean, aliens can come down at some point and take over the world. So that is a possibility. The question is whether or not they prove Burch guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And so when you talk about Dietrich and his involvement, look, we can, I don't know that Fitbit is an exact science.
It's
but
not. That's for sure.
But when we talk about a jury would probably have to buy that he had the wherewithal to take his Fitbit off, knowing that he was about to kill his girlfriend, and then have the wherewithal to put the Fitbit back on the very next morning when the police eventually come to the house to speak to him.
Okay.
Which is a hard...
But let's talk about the reliability of the Fitbit data, okay? Because isn't an issue, we had April Renario on, she's a criminal investigator. She was one of the defense's witnesses. She tested it out. It said it recorded 6,000 steps when she wore it for 15 minutes. It was an error in the band.
But by the way, I don't think that in and of itself the Fitbit alleviates Detry of being not the killer in this case. I think that that's just a small piece. I think when, again, and I hate to keep coming back to when you see this case globally, but you talk initially as to the reason he would have killed her is that he had a motive. I'm still not understanding what the motive is. Here's a guy who, when she's writing to him saying, you're cheating on me in the most angry of ways, his responses are, LOL, calm down. In fact, there's no basis to think he's angry at all. In fact, his statements and text to his mother prior are talking about breaking up with her. So why would he care?
Jonna,
and why would
what do you
he
say to that?
Case law
It makes
from
no
the
sense.
beginning of time. I think voluntary manslaughter was invented because of the heat of passion. The typical husband finds the wife in bed with the milkman, gets shot, and that's why we decided that wouldn't be murder, it would be manslaughter.
But there's no
Same thing
evidence of
happened
heat
here.
of passion. There's no evidence at all of heat of passion.
But Julie,
He
we've
caught
covered
them in the act.
We've covered cases here before. I'm thinking of the Todd Kenhammer case. A man seemed to have a great relationship
And
with his
you know
wife.
my issues with that case.
And well, sure, and he was found guilty of murdering his wife. Don't you not know what goes on in people's relationships? No one really knows.
But exactly, and so the only basis you have in making a determination as to what the evidence is here is what you have in evidence. And the evidence you have are text messages that night, which show not a guy who cares, but a guy who doesn't care what she's up to, doesn't care what she's doing. And in fact, she's the one jealous of him. There's no indication that he's jealous of her.
Jonna, can't that be seen in a different context as well?
Oh, I think it could. Plus, when you're at a party and you're texting, who the heck knows what he's saying, why he's saying it, if he's got this bravado. I think it's a whole different ball game when you catch somebody that you're in a relationship with in a compromising position with another person, number one. Number two, that Fitbit evidence never should have come in because I think that's inherently unreliable. If I'm going to kill somebody or I want to cheat on somebody, I'll leave my phone at your house, Jesse, right? So that's where it's going to ping and decide where I am, and I'll be off doing whatever I got to do nefariously someplace else. I don't like that Fitbit evidence.
And again, it did record from 3 a.m. to 6:30 a.m. 12 steps, so it seemed to be pretty accurate, and it corroborates his story that he was at home and he was sleeping.
And I think the judge did make a decision to not allow in the sleep element app of the Fitbit because he was doing a balancing in terms of making a determination as to which aspect of it was reliable.
And that's not
I think it may be an issue on appeal. I think it very well will be an issue. And if you notice on the people's summation, they did not focus on the Fitbit at all. It was almost like they knew that it was almost taboo to talk about it.
It'll be interesting in 5 years if we look back in this case, whichever the verdict is, and say, remember when they had a whole issue with Fitbit data? Think about how reliable, because when cell phones first came out, they probably said, this can't track people.
And this whole Alexa stuff now, are they going to be able to use Alexa data to convict people or use it in evidence? It's all new. Right.
Well, we are covering the George Burch case. What I want to start playing for you right now is the defense's closing arguments from yesterday. Take a look.
I told you from the start, right in our opening argument, we told you that this case is about the tragic death of Nicole Vanderheiden. And just like in their opening statement, the state completely ignored that they chose to arrest Doug Detry for that crime. They didn't tell you about it in their opening statement when they told you they were going to give you the roadmap of what happened. They ignored it. Now, this case involves so much emotion. We've seen it all. We've felt it together. Every person in this courtroom has. There's sadness, tragedy, nervousness, stress, anger. It's the full array. That's what you would expect in a case like this. But it's also important to focus on the facts of this case. The facts show you that Doug Detry committed this crime. Justice for Nicole is not going to be delivered by a wrongful conviction of George Burch. Doug Detry had the motive, the opportunity, and the connection to this crime. Now, when the state talked to you about the motive that George Burch would have, that's completely fabricated. It's brought out of thin air. You didn't hear any evidence to provide a reason why George would commit it, so they had to.
Welcome back, everybody. So that is the defense beginning their closing arguments from yesterday. Again, we are showing you what you didn't get a chance to see here on Crime and Investigation, the closing arguments by both the prosecution and the defense. And we're playing that for you because we do have a verdict in this case, but we're not going to let you know what it is until we fully analyze this case in depth. We've talked about everything with my two special guests, Jonna Spilbor and Julie Rendelman. Okay, so now the defense has taken up the case, okay?
Yes.
You hear how they're doing. They're saying that these text messages, and I want to focus on the text messages, okay? And I want to focus about Douglas Dietrich. When he took the stand, Julie, why was he so evasive with certain things? And why did he not admit on the stand what he said to Dallas Kennedy, which was, she hit her head and she walked off somewhere?
Well, two things. One is, A, he may not have remembered clearly everything that transpired, certainly not the night of the text when he was clearly drunk and high. And two, you're assuming that everything Dallas Kennedy tells the jury is accurate also. And I question her reliability as well.
Why would she have an incentive to?
I don't know that I don't know that she has any incentive
That's such a specific
whatsoever.
thing to say. She hit her head.
Well, no. Well, first of all, I think it was clear that she was someone that was closer to the victim than she was to Dietrich. I think she made it clear that she really didn't know Dietrich very well. I think she said she had known Nicole much better. But two, I don't think that simply because, like, A, her memory might not be completely accurate. B, he may not remember saying it at all. So I don't know that that leads you to believe that Dietrich is the killer because he made that statement.
Jonna, isn't that ample opportunity for the defense to jump on? Because if Douglas Dietrich really made that statement, she hit her head, and we know she suffered blunt force trauma to the head, it doesn't look so good for him.
Yeah, it implies that he is the killer. I mean, let's back up for a minute. I mean, the whole defense strategy in this case was the some other dude did it defense. And what that entails is, if you're allowed to bring it, you have to have enough evidence to bring that. You don't necessarily have to prove as the defendant that some other dude did. You don't have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt somebody else did it, but you have to have enough evidence there that the jury can go, well, maybe it wasn't the defendant. That's all you care about, is maybe it wasn't the defendant. And I think the defense did okay there.
Jonna, do you think Douglas Dietrich did well on the stand?
He did neither here nor there. Like, he was just kind of okay. Like, he was
Julie,
all
what do you
right.
think?
I think he did fine. I think he came off honestly. He as a not incredibly bright kind of loser who doesn't work, doesn't do much, and but I don't think he came off as the person that killed his girlfriend at all.
Well, it's
And
interesting.
he was originally arrested, wasn't he, for this?
So
crime?
he was kept in jail for around 17, 18 days. They obviously looked at him first for a reason. Isn't that something that the defense would jump on?
Yeah, you got to jump on that. And I believe the defense did jump on that. Look, he was the first guy that they went to, and then all of a sudden they lost interest and focused their sights elsewhere.
But you always have to remember, look, I hate that is how this case started, where Dietrich was arrested. But at the end of the day, the fact that Dietrich was arrested means absolutely nothing and should mean absolutely nothing to the jury. The question is whether the evidence in and of itself proves Burch guilty or
Jonna
proves
disagrees.
It goes
guilty.
right along with the third-party defense. Why was he arrested? We don't get arrested for no reason, I hope.
By the way,
Everybody
people
that
get
says
arrested
one of-
all the time for
I
no
hope
reason.
we don't, but that guy had, as the defense said, motive, opportunity, and by the way, he was the first guy that they
But the
fingered.
reason, by the way, the evidence is that the reason they let him go is because it turned out they had no evidence against him, which actually supports Burch being guilty even more so.
Other than motive and opportunity.
Well, we'll talk about some of the things that point the finger at Douglas Dietrich when we come back from our break. And one of the things is about the car, Nicole van der Heiden's car. We're going to talk about that when we come back. Again, we are showing the closings in this case, this really amazing case out of Wisconsin. And a little bit later today, we will reveal the final verdict about whether or not the jury came back with a verdict of guilty or not guilty for George Burch in connection with the murder of Nicole van der Heiden. So we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in a minute. Come back here on Law and Crime Live. We have so much to cover in the George Burch case. Stay tuned. Welcome back, everybody. So we are covering the George Burch case out of Wisconsin, and the reason we are covering it is because yesterday there was a verdict, but I'm not telling you what the verdict was just yet. We are replaying for you, because you did not have an opportunity to see it yesterday on the network, the closing arguments by both the state and the defense. What I'm playing for you right now is the defense's closing arguments, where they are defending their client, George Burch, against this first-degree intentional homicide charge against Nicole Vanderheiden. Take a look.
We've seen the evidence. We've seen him testify. He had the motive, the opportunity, and the connection to this crime. The first piece of evidence I ask that you focus on is when Doug Dietrich actually called the police. He didn't call the police until after Nikki's body was found. You heard the testimony. Nikki's body was found sometime at right around 2 o'clock. There was a huge police buildup, blockades, cars. You heard that young farmer boy tell you when he left the field, he went car to car. That's how many police officers were there. Doug Dietrich chose not to call the police until 4:37. He could have explained why. He didn't have a good explanation for that. You saw him on the stand. Nikki was gone. He knew why. He didn't want the police to come. He was trying to cover up what he did. You heard testimony about Nikki's Buick rendezvous. You heard a lot of testimony about it. Remember this testimony of Donald Chick. Donald Chick is a 28-year-old, or 28 years on the force of the Green Bay Police Department, a retired, experienced officer, trained to observe and report, to accurately take note of the situation in front of him. He knew the Dietrichs. He knew Doug Dietrich. He knew 2329 Berkeley Road. And when he drove by on the morning of May 21st, there was no vehicle in the garage. He remembered that specifically. 2 days later, he knew he had to call police. He knew he had to report it. He also heard that there were spare keys in the house. And you heard in testimony that those were a valet key. Sergeant Slinger said that those keys wouldn't start the vehicle. But that defeats the entire purpose of what a valet key is. We know that vehicle moved. Don Chick told you that vehicle moved. It was not there. What about the snapshot data? Well, technology can fail us. Think about a GPS, like we've talked about in this case before. When we talked about it.
Those are the closing arguments by the defense from yesterday, really pinpointing and highlighting the fact that Douglas Dietrich was the one that killed Nicole Vanderheiden. And you're hearing some of the ways that they're describing this. What I'm going to play for you right now is a continuation of this argument. And now he's going to talk about, again, witnesses that discredit what Douglas Dietrich said on the stand. Take a look.
It's been seen by Lisa Skaletsky. And then the other part that I ask that you focus on from Donald Chick's testimony is what else he saw. He didn't just see an empty garage. He saw a blue SUV parked with a door open with a woman, medium build, blonde. Who was that? Why was Nikki's vehicle gone? Where was it? Those are questions.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about what you just saw. Okay, I'm here again with Jonna Spilbor, Julie Rendelman. So what you just heard, and for everybody who's listening, is why it matters so much whether or not Nicole Vanderheiden's car moved that night. Now, we know from the snapshot device that was installed by Progressive Insurance, her car didn't move. However, Donald Chick, who lived right by Douglas Dietrich, said he looked in the garage, the car wasn't there. So the defense is making the point, look, technology fails us. There's ways that maybe it couldn't record where the car actually moved. Julie, why does that matter?
I'm not sure. I'm still having trouble with how that matters. I guess it would matter in terms of whether Dietrich took the car.
Yeah, to use it in connection with, you know.
But Burch's testimony is that the car had nothing to do with it, that it was his car that was used.
But John, isn't it important to know if Douglas Dietrich said the car wasn't moved and that he actually did move it, he would be the only one who would have been able to move Nicole's car that night. So why would he have moved her car if he had nothing to do with this?
Well, and that's a good question. And anything that you can put forth that's going to attack the credibility of the key person that the defense is putting forth as the actual culprit, the same person who was originally arrested for this crime, is, I think, crucial. And I don't like this. I don't like there's so much technology that was used in this case. The Fitbit, the snapshot, hang on a second, because I think all of that can be manipulated, and the judge should not allow any of it.
Well, I have to say, some would argue that
Fitbit.
the electronic, evidence and testimony is actually more reliable than a person's memory, because it's not based on, how our brain works. It's based on technology that's created for the very purpose of keeping track of these things.
Insurance has its own reason to have data manipulated. Fitbit has its own reason to have data manipulated.
But
now we're using it to convict people for the rest of their lives.
Has no relevance to this case.
But it might if you're the defense and want to say that Douglas Dietrich had used Nicole's car.
For what purpose?
To transport himself one way or another to kill Nicole.
What do you? It doesn't. Burch's
But
story.
here's the thing: if he moved her car, why would he have moved her car in the night in question? Why? Why would he have done it? If she's missing, we know she didn't use her car. Why would he move her car? Why would he use his car? Why? Would he, that was the only way he was transported.
There's no reason he would have, but it has nothing to do with this story. The entire testimony, every bit of evidence you hear, is that Burch is saying that it was his car that was
Doesn't it go to his credibility? Doesn't it go? If he's saying he didn't move the car,
there's no
and
evidence that the car was moved.
Donald Sheik, who lives right there, said he didn't see it, and that snapshot device maybe is not 100% reliable. That's the counter argument, Julie.
There's no reason for Schick to know or not know. Just because why? Because he was like one of those people that was known to have a good memory, that he therefore knows that the car wasn't there or the car was moved. I don't understand.
Isn't this just about credibility, though?
Largely about credibility, and that's very, very important. I mean, and that's another thing. I mean, the defendant took the stand here. So credibility, his credibility is an issue. Dietrich's credibility is an issue.
Well,
everybody's credibility is an issue.
We don't have to talk about
how this car is relevant.
We can agree to disagree about the car, but let's talk a little bit about Douglas Dietrich. You heard them talking about the fact that he didn't contact the police until much later the next day. He slept, took care of the baby, didn't try to get a hold of Nicole any point in that night. We know that he went to sleep. We know all this. Is it not a little suspicious, Julie, that somebody who's in a relationship with somebody else would not file a missing persons report until 17 hours later?
I have to be honest, and this kind of goes to what you were saying in terms of, relation. We don't know what's in the inner. I'm not supporting your position, but it kind of goes in our favor. It's like, look, people have fights with each other. People, accept certain behaviors from other people that other relationships wouldn't. I don't know if this is a situation where she's left the house before, and so he wasn't surprised.
You have a baby, that changes the game.
By the way, he did reach out to her. He did recognize after waking up from, I would assume to be a drug and alcohol infested, slumber, that he recognized that she was clearly mad at him. He did reach out to her. He sent a picture of her with the child to try to reach her. And it's when he realized that he wasn't getting the responses that he called the police.
Now, Julie makes a great point. People get into fights. They don't contact the next person the next day. I don't even care if you live with them. So is it that out of the ordinary that he didn't realize she was missing until, something's really off?
When you have a baby together, yes, it's absolutely out of the ordinary. And the reason he didn't file the missing person report is because he knew she was dead because he killed her. I mean, that's the link that the defense wants the jury to believe.
But then why would
it's plausible. It is plausible.
But he does call the police eventually. So what's
why would he do
he's with the baby the whole time.
Because now he has to listen. People watch shows like this. People watch Law and Order. People know eventually, how can I cover up my misdeeds?
But Jonna, that's assuming he's a sophisticated
criminal. And he doesn't cover it up. He leaves the cords that were used to kill her out on the front lawn of his neighbor's house right outside.
Let's talk about the cords real quick. Let's talk about these cords. So we know that the cord was found outside, okay? I think it was discovered by a neighbor. It had George Burch's DNA and Nicole's DNA. We believe it was used to ultimately strangle her. Someone that killed her, why would it be left outside, Jonna?
Well, like you said, not every criminal is sophisticated. And I don't know what happened, what got tossed inside that vehicle. I don't know. But But the fact that a cord that had two people's DNA on it is found outside does not
If he-
a
Julie, real
conviction
quick.
make.
If he knows he has killed his girlfriend outside his home, the first thing he's going to do is A, take out something to wipe that area clean, like water it clean, and B, get rid of the evidence that could link him
Just
to it.
like there was cleanser inside the house.
That is true. There
It's
was this.
amazing that the evidence that's on that cord is not his, but instead the Burch, who's the killer in this case.
That's
amazing.
Again, we can't deny the DNA evidence or the cell phone evidence linking George Burch to this crime. But the defense really has an argument to make here. So let's listen in right now. Again, this is from yesterday, their closing arguments. Let's hear what they argued next.
Talk about their general relationship. He got on the stand and told you that wedding bells were in the future. He talked about how Dylan Vanderheiden was going to walk his mom down the aisle. Notice he didn't tell you that just 2 weeks, not even 2 weeks prior, he was texting and communicating with his mother that in fact they were going to break up. That Nicole was going to go on her way with the kids too. It was not a happy relationship. Greg was a close personal friend to both, Greg Matthew. And he testified he saw them fight. Now, they fought like a normal couple would. But even Greg, somebody that is close to them, didn't know that Doug wasn't working because their relationship was on the rocks. Greg didn't know that the relationship was in a funk. And he's a close personal friend. You heard that their relationship was indeed in a funk and that Doug wasn't working. That was not a good relationship. You can see that boiling underneath.
Again, the defense really hammering away at the fact that Douglas Dietrich is the one that committed this crime. What I want to play for you right now is a continuation of the defense's theory here. And interesting to note, we're going to talk about it in a minute, this idea of motive, that George Burch had no motive to kill Nicole Vanderheiden. And we're going to talk about his background, because his background became a significant portion of his testimony 2 days ago when he testified. So we're going to talk about that in a minute. But again, here's the defense's closing arguments. And this is where they talk about Doug Dietrich's motive to kill his girlfriend, Nicole Vanderheiden. Take a look.
And then that brings us to May 20th and May 21st. Nikki wanted to go out. She wanted to have a good time. You heard her in Dallas talking. She was excited for a date night. She got to go out. She didn't get to go out often. And she got to go out with Doug. Doug had other priorities. Doug's priorities were his other friends, drinking, drugs, and Nikki when she was around. Now, when they went to the watering hole, things started okay. Things started great, it sounded like. They were having a decent time. But it wasn't long until they separated. It wasn't long until the argument started. You heard how that escalated from Nikki's point of view. We heard some of Nikki's last words through text messages to Doug. She called him abusive. She said he hurts her. And they were about infidelity. Those three things. Now, Doug Dietrich was on that stand. He could have explained any of them to you. He could have taken ownership for any of that. He didn't know why. That's what he said today. And you're supposed to believe that. He just didn't know why she would say those things. We all know why she would say Doug. And then Doug finally got home, still didn't really care where Nikki was. And he caught them. He caught Nikki with George Burch. So you have a relationship that's on the rocks. You have this boiling fight. And then you have George with Nikki. Those are each by themselves sufficient to prove motive. Altogether, that creates the ultimate crime of passion. The ultimate motive. Remember, George had no motive to commit this crime. None. That's a huge hole in the state's case. You also need to focus on the next day. It's now May 22nd. People had started to find out that Nikki had passed. People were sad. She clearly had a lot of people that cared about her. We've seen that in this process. One of those people was Dallas Kennedy.
Okay, so again, the defense, that was their closing arguments. They arguing a lot of different things there, but one of the things I want to point out right now is talking about George Burch's background and how this guy really didn't have an incentive or a motive to kill a complete stranger, Nicole Vanderheiden. And again, I'm here with attorney Jonna Spilbor, law and crime trial analyst Julie Rendelman. Julie, let's start with you. The idea that knowing about his background information, okay, George Burch testified the other day, I would say maybe for 30, 40 minutes, just about who he was as a man and how he grew up and where he went to and what he did. We know that he was convicted of 5 crimes. Us three, what the jury doesn't know is that he was actually on trial 20 years ago for a murder charge about a gang-related shooting. But doesn't that sit well a little bit with the jury and say, hey, this guy, he seemed emotional on the stand. He seemed like a real person. I know we have reports, even from people here that work at Law and Crime, that said he seemed more of a human being than Douglas Dietrich. How would you answer that?
Well, I think, anytime someone testifies on the stand, there's an acting job that's required. And I hate to say this, but really it is a performance. And especially when you're a defendant who has the most to gain and the most to lose by not being forthright, that sometimes people are good, that doesn't mean that they're telling the truth. And while I do agree that he didn't come off as bad as I necessarily would expect him to, the problem with his testimony was that the statements he was making did not, as far as I'm concerned, jive with the evidence. And so simply because he came off okay doesn't mean that what he had to say made any sense and helped his case at all. And 2, 5 convictions is something for the jury to consider whether a person is being honest. They're supposed to consider that. And I don't think that also bodes well for the jury.
Jonna, what do you think? I mean, does this jury even care about where he grew up, that he loves fishing, that he had a close relationship with his father? Do they care about any of that?
Oh, yeah. I think putting him on the stand, frankly, was a Hail Mary. It was an attempt by the defense to humanize this guy. When you have a client, when you have a defendant who has a criminal history, and in fact, he was on probation, which explains a lot of the behavior that we think is bizarre, it's not typical to want to put them on the stand because that is all going to come out. But in this case, the defense wanted to make sure the jury looked at him like a human being, not just some big 6'7" guy who decided to rape and murder this person that he just met in the street one night, and then and then helped the boyfriend dump her, or he dumped her by himself, or however it went down in actuality. And that's why they put him on the stand. And I don't know if it's so much acting. It's just like, when you want a job interview, you don't sit there and snap your gum and sit back and, you sit up, you address the jury, and that's what he was doing.
Well, we're going to have to ultimately see whether or not this played for the jury. We know that there was a verdict last night, but we're not going to tell it to you just yet. What I want to play for you right now is, again, some more of the closing arguments from the defense. And this is when they talk about, do you know what a sign of guilt is? Again, pointing the finger at Douglas Dietrich. Take a look.
We can't tell you whether or not any of those things were used because Dr. Rogalska didn't have a way to compare it to those injuries. There is a missing murder weapon in this case, and we can't tell you where it is. Mr. Burch cannot tell you where it is. But again, he does not have to. The state bears the burden in this case. It is their job. They need to explain why there is a missing murder weapon in this case, and they have not done so. They didn't even bring it up. What they did bring up, remember all those photos of the blue and white shoes with the M pattern. They also highlighted the herringbone pattern on Nicole's back. They wanted that in your minds. They showed that photo over and over. Think about that M or V pattern and those blue and white Nike Shox. I don't know if the state was caught off guard or if they were doing it intentionally, but we heard later that those weren't even George Burch's shoes. Those M or V patterns. Those were Matt Wassenberg's shoes. They're not trying to say Matt Wassenberg was a part of this. In fact, George Burch didn't even live with Matt Wassenberg at that time. So it's not even like he could have even slipped those on. They didn't even have that right. Do you remember who had that M and V pattern in this case on their shoes? Doug Dietrich. Now, George says he doesn't know what hit him in the back of the head, but he eventually saw Mr. Dietrich with a handgun. We also know that Mr. Dietrich had a concealed carry permit. A concealed carry permit is so that you can have a handgun and conceal it. You don't do that with a shotgun. You don't do it with a rifle. Police didn't find a billy club or a taser at his house. You have a handgun. No handgun was ever recovered. This missing murder weapon was never recovered. Are they in the ponds behind the Dietrich house on 2329 Berkeley Road? Are they in the East River or along the East River Trail? Again, George Burch can't tell you. We can't tell you. It's not our job to tell you. It's the state's. One of the things that could have helped the state find that murder weapon is if George would have come forward right away. He should have come forward right away. He knows that. He told you it was wrong. He took ownership for that right there on the stand. And just because he didn't come forward.
All right, everybody. Again, that's the defense delivering the closing arguments. You just heard about the fact that Douglas Dietrich had this pattern on his shoes that's consistent with injuries sustained by Nicole Vanderheiden. We're going to talk about that when we come back from this short break. Again, we're recapping this case, and a little bit later today, I will deliver the final verdict in this case. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Law&Crime Live, everybody. Sorry. We are covering the George Burch case here, and the reason we're covering it is because yesterday we had a verdict that was delivered, but I can't tell you what it is yet. I just can't do it. And the reason I can't do it is because yesterday on Crime and Investigation, before we ended our show, we were not able to show you the full closing arguments by both the prosecution and the defense. That's what we're doing for you right now. And after we play those closings, we will let you know what the final verdict was in the George Burch case, a man who is charged with first-degree intentional homicide in connection with the death of Nicole Vanderheiden. What I want to tell you right now from before we went to break was you heard the defense talking about this U-shaped stamp mark that was found on Nicole Vanderheiden's back. Now, the reason that is important is because Douglas Dietrich had a pair of shoes that matched that imprint. Let's talk about it. I'm here again with Julie, do not roll your eyes at me just yet. I'm here with Law&Crime trial analyst.
Who doesn't
Julie
have shoes
Rendelman.
that would match that? I mean, give me a
But
break.
then why would his shoe imprint be on the back? Why?
I don't think it was his shoe imprint. I think it was
No one else
his.
had that shoe imprint.
I don't even understand what you mean. What do you mean?
If his shoe had a pattern at the bottom of it, and it matched a pattern that was found in her back.
By the way, there was nothing unique about the shoe that matched. It was simply the pattern of a rounded shoe. So I don't even understand what anyone's making an issue about this.
Jonna, isn't there an issue with the shoe, though?
Yes, the shoe is a direct connection to
you're
the
gonna say
fact that Mr. Dietrich is the actual killer here.
You finally have
That's a
him.
huge piece of evidence. But it really is a huge piece of evidence, especially in a case like this where the defense is totally somebody else did a defense. And now they've got another key piece of evidence to sway the jury that it's possible the defendant is not the guilty one.
Well, that's not where they ended there. They continue on with their argument, the defense is closing. Now you're going to hear a little bit more about what Douglas Dietrich was doing and his actions and his activities after Nicole's disappearance and her eventual murder. Let's listen in.
Is the Fitbit expert that can explain any of this and any of this data. Not here, not in this case. Why did they not provide that expert? Why did they not want somebody to explain that data? Why did they not want someone to explain what would happen if there's multiple Fitbit units? Can you connect to multiple profiles? Different phones? We don't know. The state chose not to bring someone. A major piece of this of all the evidence in this case, in the state's case, and our defense is DNA. We didn't challenge any of the DNA findings by Mr. Scott. He seemed incredibly respected. His testimony came through clearly. And we told you right from the opening we weren't going to challenge it because it helps verify Mr. Burch's story. Just like the Google data. George Burch explained that he was having consensual sex with Miss Vanderheiden. That he had to carry her body to that field. That explains why his DNA was on Nicole. Now, why was George Burch's DNA on that cable? George took the stand. He didn't try to guess at it or try to explain it to you because he couldn't. Because he was knocked out. He stayed consistent with that. You would think if he was trying to make up this elaborate story, he would have come up with some sort of explanation to everything. He didn't even try. Because he didn't need to. He didn't know. He testified truthfully. You also heard Kevin Scott testify about secondary touch DNA.
Some interesting tidbits there. Let's analyze it. Julie, you heard that if George Burch was to make up this elaborate story, why was it so complex with little minute details, and why was it something about him getting hit in the back of the head and him getting unconscious? Wouldn't there be an easier explanation for why he's not the person that did this?
I don't think based on the evidence that we know exists, that he could have come up with an easier, less elaborate story.
Let me give you one. If he really did make it up, couldn't he have said, I was having sex with Nicole. All of a sudden, I felt a nudge, and it was Douglas Dietrich with a gun. And I go back, and I stand back, and then he points the gun at Nicole, and I have to sit there and watch him murder her.
I hear you.
Instead of being knocked out.
I understand. I think part of the reason he's knocked out in his lie is because it makes him less culpable, because then he doesn't have to articulate watching her die and have to explain exactly how she died, because I think that he's not that sophisticated, so he may not be able to fully explain and match the medical examiner's testimony as to how she died.
Jonna, sometimes they say that the more details you provide in a story, the more it looks like you're lying.
Which sometimes is the case, but what about the fact that he was knocked out because Mr. Dietrich came up behind him, knocked him out so he could kill his girlfriend, who he was mad at because they were having sex on the street.
But, you know, John, it's not entirely clear he was knocked out. And it's not entirely clear that the Douglas Dietrich could have committed a murder in that.
By the way, I have to, if you catch your girlfriend having a relationship with someone else, you're not going to knock the guy out. You're going to say to the guy, what the is going on here? Who the hell are you? What? I mean, that's what's going to, you're not going to knock the guy out.
He was in the way, John?
He was in the way. He was, well, according to his story, he was in the way.
Right, which is absolutely preposterous. I mean, I'm laughing. It's
I'm
not funny.
No, I know
We're
laughing with each other.
Well, the whether or not this story is believable will have to be decided by the jury. And again, there was a verdict last night. We will deliver it to you later in the program, but not yet. We are fully analyzing this case from beginning to end. When we come back, we'll play you some more of the defense's closing arguments. You're not going to want to miss anything. It gets good. We'll be back in a minute. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Law and Crime Live, everybody. We're covering the George Burch case, and yesterday a verdict was delivered, but we're not letting you know what that is yet because we want to show you the closing arguments by both the state and the defense. Now, before we do that, I have to say so long to our guest from this morning, Julie Rendelman. It was great seeing you, Julie.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Now, Jonna's going to stick around. We have a lot more to discuss, Jonna, because what I want to play for you right now is the conclusion of the defense's closing arguments. Take a look.
Blood was there, and that same DNA. I don't think the state's trying to say Dylan was there. That was Doug's DNA. How about on her bloody tank top? Same scenario. Doug's DNA was there. I don't think they're trying to say Dylan's was. But maybe most damning to their case, on the interior and exterior of Nicole's bloody underwear that you saw today. How is that explained? Unless Doug Dietrich was there. Doug Dietrich confessed. She hit her head. We get all of these clues that show you that this isn't some open and shut case like the state said. They wanted to rest, apparently, after the DNA and after the Google data. They bear the burden in this case. There's no explanation for why that DNA would be there. Kevin Scott told you it's not like those clothes appeared to have recently been washed, that it would mix that DNA. There's no explanation for why Doug's Dietrich would be on the exterior and interior of Nicole's bloody underwear. Now these boards and these things that I've talked about, these are just problems or holes in the state's case. These are just pieces that don't make sense on their version of events. Each one is a piece, but when you take them all together, they grow into something much larger. This is just a hole in their case. You can't forget that this isn't even including all of the testimony that George Burch provided. He fills those holes of his own. He provided his story. He told you what happened on that night. Now when the prosecutor was cross-examining George, there's a reason why attorneys start to yell and why they start to build their voice, why they suddenly stand up and start pointing when they haven't done that the entire time. There's a reason why you start to do this. Because you're only looking for an emotional reaction. Because you don't have the facts. Because you don't have the smoking gun. You don't have them. You yell. You try to get